Hello, this is Dr. Karen Midier, and I'm here today to talk about the challenges of aging. And when I thought about it, I figured I would talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let me tell you a little bit about me. I have been a practicing clinical psychologist for over 45 years. I also have a practice in coaching that I do. I coach on aging and retirement, and I also have a mental health practice and have been focusing on older adults exclusively for the last 12 years. I have a lot of experience working with families, assisted livings. I worked in nursing homes, and then I work both in private practice and in coaching. And my most recent desire is to continue to educate people in the aging arena. I think we all can learn so much as we age and as we get to the challenges that we are put to as we get older. So as I work with many older adults across the spectrum, from my 35-year-olds worrying about their parents to my 70-year-olds worrying about their parents, and then the 75-year-olds worrying about their kids, sometimes I scratch my head about what I am doing with this, quote unquote, individual counseling that I usually do, because I don't often see couples in my practice. I do from time to time, but and I will bring in a family member from time to time. But for the most part, I work with individuals, and we spend time working with the family system. And what I've learned is that even if there is one person in the room, having an impact on the whole system is extremely possible. That's why I'm giving this talk today. Because relationships change, but they are so important to us in our daily life. We care, we get angry, we feel frustrated, and we sometimes feel that our ideas aren't valued. And I want to look at what we can do to make a difference in the people that we care about. I will discuss some overall relationship challenges and then some communication solutions towards the end. Please note that this is the tip of the iceberg, and I hope that you can take some tips and apply them to your life or to your relationships going forward, because all of this information is so important. So what are the significant relationships that we have to nurture in our lives? I mean, it can be old friends, it can be new developing friends, it can be couples and partners, it can be work friends, it can be community connections. Sometimes it can be spiritual people from your temple or your church. It can be your family members, both your parents, your adult children, and your grandchildren. And I feel that in the field of aging, we have to look at all of these with a new lens, because things change as we get older, and what we need to look at now is different. I have people that come into my room who, talk with me about their 90-year-old parent who is, sneaking food into their, into their house. Sometimes they, are sneaking Starbucks when they're supposed to be on, a diet that is, for insulin resistance or insulin problems. And so we have a lot of things that happen between parents and children that sometimes become problems in relationships. Sometimes with adult children and their significant parent, there is a role reversal that they are dealing with. And the children will come to me and will say, well, I don't understand, why my parent is doing things that are counterproductive to their health. And don't they know they should really do things like, eating healthily and exercise? And I feel like I'm ready to pull my hair out trying to get them to do the things that are so important to them. And as you reflect back, or actually if they reflect, the parent reflects back, that was the same conversation they might have had with their adolescent teenager when, they were trying to do the same thing, getting their children who were teenagers to do all the appropriate behaviors. And here we have this incredible reversal that happens. And I find that my work, my original work was working with adolescents and their families. And I find that a lot of those same issues continue to rebound now, just 50 years later. And so I feel that all that training that I got back in the day is certainly very relevant right now. So as we continue to talk about all of this, I wanted to talk a little bit about the important takeaways that we have when we're dealing with all of this. And so the most important takeaways are that regular and open communication about the changes that are happening are important for you to be able to do. I don't care what age you are, whether or not you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, or 60s. But so one of the things we're going to talk about at the end is about those kinds of communication skills and strategies that you can use to try to deepen the relationships and deal with conflicts that will happen in the normal course of relationships, especially in families. So there are a lot of evolving dynamics that happen with parents and their children. And so I will talk a little bit about that. I will also talk about the grandparents and the relationships with grandparents and grandchildren, because that is one of the bright topics. Grandparents can have many issues with their children. I mean, sometimes they get over involved and the parents, want them to kind of take more of a back role. Then, there are situations where grandparents feel that they're cut off from their grandchildren, and they are devastated when relationships aren't working well with usually it's their children, and when they can't see their grandchildren or their child because of some, perceived wrong or whatever led to that estrangement. And that's a very sad situation when that happens. And sometimes that gets resolved, and sometimes it is difficult to manage. Those are the kinds of negatives in the ugly that I talk about. The other area is friendships in older adulthood. Friendships in older adulthood are very crucial for emotional well-being, and maintaining those friendships can be challenging, especially due to factors like relocation and health issues. And sometimes, obviously during the pandemic and everyone was isolated, it was people got out of practice with having relationships with others. When we had all this social isolation, some people were very good at maintaining communication either through phone or learn new skills on video, but not everyone has. And there are many of my older clients, particularly some of my clients in their 70s and 80s, who still have remnants of the disconnect that happened when the pandemic happened. And it is difficult. It's like they got out of practice with being social and re-engaging with others, either within their family or sometimes friendships has been difficult. Sometimes people are still nervous about going to other than doctors, I mean, which is probably the one place they will go, sometimes they're nervous about going out into the world. Some of them have yet to be on a plane. Some of them feel like their world continues to close in, and they are lonely and isolated. So one of my suggestions is to make sure that you reach out and open your door and open your mind and checking on your neighbors, checking on your friends, making sure they're doing okay, make sure they have somebody who they can call in case there is an emergency. Some people feel they're reluctant to reach out to ask for help. And so if you can take on the role of asking them to do, that would be great. I mean, I just, even if it's shoveling snow in the winter, making sure their air conditioner is on and they have enough water during this really hot summer heat. Being neighborly and attentive is important. Making sure that you check to see whether or not there's, if they always used to pick up their paper from the yard, if there's 5 papers out there, maybe there's something going on. Making sure that you are trying to connect with your people around you is very important. The other thing is, as people get older, friendships start to, people die. And so a lot of my older adults have had a tremendous amount of loss in their life. They've lost people that have been long-term friends. They have lost sometimes family members. And so their world continues to shrink and get smaller. So finding ways to be able to recreate new relationships is one of the challenges as you age. When people are living in their home environment and they're isolated in their little houses, many times people don't go out. I mean, unless they see the mailman, occasionally they'll go out to a grocery store, but they can be very lonely in their house. Some of these communities, some of the senior communities have been a good resource for some of my older adults. Sometimes they're active adult communities that have tons of opportunities for meeting new people. I've seen people that have started over after losing a spouse and they couldn't stay in their home anymore, that sometimes they move closer to their family and they realize, oh my God, I might be closer to my family if I need them, but they are so involved with their own lives. I better, figure out how to develop my life because I can't be with them 24/7. So that is another area that is really important for people to remember, that just because you're 75 years old, that you can't reconnect and meet new people. It is harder. I mean, I will not lie about that. I mean, that is probably the biggest complaint that I get from people, is how difficult it is to meet new people and how it can't replace the kind of long-term relationship that you might have had all your life. I mean, somebody that you've known for 50 years is not the same as somebody that you've known for 5 or 10 months. It doesn't mean that you can't develop a closeness with them and it can't be a positive relationship. And sometimes it can be even a better relationship, but it's hard to keep on starting over. And yet we know the protective qualities that we have in relationships. We know that if we don't do the kinds of things that we need to do, the loneliness will lead to depression, isolation, and then physical health challenges that will impact your life. And the And that also just, talks about, the places where people can go and meet people. Sometimes the senior centers, some people don't see themselves as seniors. So I don't want to go to a senior center with all those old people. But a lot of times the older folks are just as welcoming, and they're just as old as you are. They're still there because they're either trying to learn something new, um, get healthy by exercising and doing it in a group setting, or maybe doing yoga, or maybe learning a new skill in a class that's being given. And one of the other ways that people oftentimes will meet people is through the Newcomers Club. Let's say they move to a new community, or they're thinking about moving to a new community. They can connect with people in a Newcomers Club. And there are a lot of older adults that oftentimes find themselves into those newer newcomers communities where they do lots of different things. It doesn't matter if it's knitting, it could be a knitting group, it could be a group where it could be a widows group. I have two clients that are in widows groups in their communities, and many people have really flourished in some of those communities, and they're not all the same. So when people go and look for the communities to live in, they really have to evaluate. And I encourage families to do this together, because that way everyone has reasonable expectations about what services are provided in those communities, what things you might need to do to help your parent in that community. Some of those communities have, you can purchase help to get as people get more infirmed. Some communities don't have that. Some communities provide food, some don't. At some point, I'm going to do another video on all these different communities, because it's confusing for people about what is offered. And it's not only just the big communities where you have to spend a ton of money to be able to get services throughout the spectrum. That is one, but there are many other options out there throughout the country. The other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about was that there's hope. That, even though, not all my stories have happy endings. I mean, I do have a lot of stories that have happy endings, but some of the most poignant memories that I have had is when I've helped clients find peace in the ending of their relationships. It's not always possible, but I have had it happen more times than not. I've had parents and their adult children who have had conflictual relationships or difficulties in their relationships throughout their lives, who have managed to find some peace towards the end of their lives. And so when their parent has passed away, they have felt some sense of comfort knowing that it wasn't a time of conflict, that there were lots of good feelings and memories that they were able to shift to, that they wish they could have had all their years, but they were thankful that they were able to do towards the end of life. We are so lucky if we begin to address some of these problems earlier versus later. I'd much rather help people in their 60s and 70s rather than having to wait until their 90s. But it is not too late in your 90s. I've worked with people in their 90s, 95, who where the parent who is 95 has learned that they need to watch what they say. Sometimes they're, just letting things go out of their mouth, which might be a judgmental thinking, is not going to be the thing that is the best thing for making this relationship one that feels safe and nurturing. And that is what we would like in the utmost of senses. We want to be able to have our relationships feel safe, nurturing, growing, one that continues to, wrestle with problems that you might have, and then find ways of working through it and getting over it, so that you don't live with a life of regret. That is not a thing that you want to kind of eat away at your physical and mental health. So I also wanted to talk a little bit about couples. And because I do work with a lot of individuals as they age who have problems in relationships with the rest of their families. But I also work with sometimes individuals within couples. And part of one of the issues that we will deal with sometimes is people are in very different places. Some people are still working. Some people have been retired for a while. And it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman. I have women that continue to work and men who have retired. And I have had men that have women continue to work and women who have been retired or maybe didn't work at all. And the shifting roles that happen in couples when retirement is on the horizon, or when one person wants the other person to retire and the other person is saying, I don't want to retire. I'm not ready to retire. I understand what working does for me. And, and especially sometimes with women, they got a late start. They might have had children. And now they finally have a good place in the work environment and they want to continue. Some people need to continue to work. Some people work because they love working and they know that it provides a lot of sustenance for them emotionally, and they get a lot of things from it. And then sometimes I get people come into my practice and they'll say, I don't know. I mean, here we are together. Now we're together 24/7. I don't know what to do with him. I mean, he keeps on asking me about, how to do something with the dishwasher and doing this and that. And he gets into my business. Sometimes I just want to tell him he needs to go get a job. And so these are the kinds of, things I love working with, because you realize that these are normal transitions that people are going through. And they usually are open to trying to figure out some way to manage this new life position that they are in. And when you realize how much time you spend at work, and sometimes both of you at work, it's hard to bring your lives together and then figure out how to make it match. And I always will ask people to look at what you want to do individually, what you want to do as a couple, and to really talk through some of the communication strategies that you need to. Sometimes you need to sit down and, write down all the different desires that you have and the things that you want to do. And so does your partner. And then you have to look at the differences and how you deal with compromise on some of those things, because you're not always in the same place. I've got some strategies to help people. I've got some books that I give people to read. I give them homework of things they have to look at so that people have some ways to address that going forward. And so, these are important things to be able to consider as a couple. And even if you are an individual who is thinking about retirement and retiring, you're leaving oftentimes relationships that you have at work. And those were maybe easy friendships and friendships that were predicated on that work environment. But as you retire and move away, sometimes you feel like you're out of the loop. and you don't feel as connected anymore. That is a huge loss for many people. And at that point, that is another one of the reasons why developing activities outside of work is such an important thing to be able to do. And starting it, if you can, a little bit before you retire will help you feel like you have something to retire to, rather than retire and then realize, oh my God, I don't know how to fill my day, and you feel lost, lonely, without connection. So one of the other areas that come into my life is, dating and divorce. Things do not, end when you're older in the world of dating. And unfortunately, sometimes people do get divorced as they age. And both of those present different kinds of challenges. I do an awful lot of dating help in terms of help. Sometimes I work with people in their 60s and 70s who are re-entering the dating market in this day and age with online dating, and they need a lot of guidance and help with how to do that. I mean, many times they might have been either divorced, or they might have lost a spouse, or maybe they had a relationship that broke up. And they are having to find ways that doesn't stop them from wanting to have relationships. And so I do a lot of, coaching with clients on relationships and dating, and doing that in their 60s and 70s. And I've even had a few in their 80s that I've worked with on that. And that it has been a lot of fun, and I've learned a lot because, I haven't been single myself for a long time. So I've had to learn what's happening, and I learn from my clients all the time. The divorce one is also difficult. And but there are many times when people, their kids leave their nest, and the parents can be older. They can be in their 60s sometimes, and divorce does happen in people's 60s and 70s. So those are things that you definitely know that are possible, that can happen. And I'm wondering if anybody has any questions for me. Let me just look to see. I don't think I see anything there. Okay. I want you to know that some of the things that I wanted to talk about had to do with some of the things that we can do to help people as they age, and the communication strategies. So the things that I'm going to tell you about, they're not necessarily things that you haven't heard about before, but they are things that I am going to remind you about, because I don't care if you're 20, 30, 60, 70, or 80. These are important communication strategies that you have to think about. Sometimes you either need to relearn them, or sometimes you just need to remind yourself about them so that you can follow through. And one is active listening, and this involves focusing on the speaker, avoiding interruptions, and responding thoughtfully. It shows people respect for the speaker's point of view, and it can help in understanding their perspective better. It also means you have to be in the moment and not in your head, so that you can pay attention to what they're saying and not with your response. And that takes some practice and skill. Nonverbal communication, pay attention to somebody's body language and eye contact and their tone of voice. This can, sometimes that can convey a lot of information, way more than words. Use I statements instead of you. And, you're always saying, you do this, you do that. And it reduces, if you use I statements, it reduces the blame that people oftentimes feel. So, I feel upset when you give me a hard time when I'm doing the best I can with, trying to fix the toilet or whatever it is. I mean, you need to, obviously it's usually something worse than that, but you get the idea. You want to be able to use I statements and then state, what they're doing that is upsetting you and what the feeling is. And then sometimes you can add, and what I prefer for you to do instead is something else. I want you to be able to be honest and open in your relationships as much as you can. I understand some people, if they are not very healthy, being honest and open isn't always the best policy. But if you're dealing with people who have some sense of their own self and are somewhat healthy, it's important as an important way to build trust, and which is important in any relationship. And I want you to be able to share your emotions thoughtfully and respectfully. Avoid assumptions. This one gets a lot of people in trouble. Don't assume that you know what the other person is thinking and feeling. Always check it out. I'm just checking out with you. Is this how you feel about this? It seems like that's what you said to me. And then you can check with them. Is that what and said, or is that how you feel? And then they can say, no, that's not how I feel. I really feel, that I was being honest and truthful with you. I wasn't trying to be whatever it is. So practice empathy. Try to understand the other person's feelings and perspectives. Put yourself in their shoes. That is important, to be able to have other people really understand how you, how you might think and feel. And that helps you feel understood. And it also helps with connection and feeling closer. It helps feeling like you're being respected and loved, you're being valued. All of those things are so important when you're trying to nurture relationships. Use positive reinforcement. I mean, you were taught that when you were oftentimes, trying to give good words to your children when they were growing up. But that does not stop just because you've grown up. Telling your spouse that you really appreciate that they cooked a great dinner, that they took out the garbage, that they, that they look beautiful today, that they look like they lost 5 pounds, that they, gave a great presentation. All those things are important to be able to notice, and especially people who get their values from doing things. We all have, there's a lot of love languages that we have, and everyone has their special ones. But people who appreciate showing love by the activities they do, or they feel love because of the activities that they expect from you, those are important ways for you to be able to communicate how much you appreciate and care for the things they do for you. And that may be their love language for you. Seek to understand before being understood. So I think this is an important one. So you're trying to fully understand your partner's or your friend's viewpoint before you express your own. I don't think you always have to do that, but I do think at least being open to listening to somebody else's viewpoint is important. And it can help reduce conflicts and misunderstandings. So that is important. And in this time of so much conflict and sometimes antipathy, it's hard to do that. And sometimes those conversations might even be better off not even being brought up. But if you can, it would be nice to be able to do that. And then practice regular check-ins with each other's in your day and your feelings. Because especially with kids or with your spouse, it helps you feel connected. And this is a way of making sure that people are getting positive strokes in their relationships or building up their relationship bank account. We talk about how everyone, has deposits into your bank account for all the good deeds that you do and all the things that you appreciate from the other person. And then you talk about withdrawals from your relationship bank account when there's conflict or when somebody says something that's mean or unhealthy. And of course, those negatives have an awful lot of power. So you want to do all the things that you can do to build up that relationship bank account so that if something negative does happen, you've got some, extra money in there to be able to, temper it until you can build it up again. I always think that is a good strategy to be able to do. Now, remember that, effective communication takes practice. It's okay to make mistakes. You're not going to do it perfect all the time. And if you do need extra help, I encourage you to seek guidance from a professional, such as a psychologist, a counselor, or even a coach. So all of those things, can make a big, big difference in your life. So, the importance of understanding the changes in relationships as we age, I think that you can agree with me that some of these, are issues that you have throughout your life, but sometimes they also are just for aging. So do you have any relationships that challenge or frustrate you? Something that might be happening in the present time or even at work? And, think about that. Think about maybe writing about that. What are some of the things that you can do in addition to some of the self-reflection that I talked about? My suggestion is to begin journaling to help you identify those issues and the feelings that you're experiencing. Journaling sometimes can bring to your mind through your journaling the kinds of things that might be underneath that you might not be paying attention to. So figure out what you would like to focus on first. What relationship challenges feel the most doable for you? And then write the next one that's down in line. Put it down on paper. So it's not just all, in your head, cogitating and making you upset. Review the communication strategies that I went over. It's nothing new, but they're important. And use a calendar or a notebook to write down your goals for the week, the month, or the year about which things you want to focus on in terms of your relationships and improving them, so that you have some things that you're putting down in black and white that you can review either weekly, monthly, or quarterly. And it's important for you to put your intentions out there for yourself so that you can review it with your partner, your friend, your therapist, your coach, or any other accountability partner out there. Well, that is my thoughts for the day. I am hoping that you got some tidbits here that would make it helpful for you as you contemplate the relationships that you currently have in your life. I am hoping that people will comment in the chat afterwards, or if you watch this either on YouTube or in LinkedIn or Facebook, so that there can be some other maybe discussion about all of this. I think that there's not enough talk about relationship challenges as we age, and I do think we do need to have a dialogue about it. If you want any more information about me, you can contact me at Karen@coachingagingadults.com. That is the best place to learn about what I'm doing these days. It's where my blog posts are written for the most part. And I also have a YouTube channel that we continue to grow as I put information out there. And I will be doing my course on retirement, and designing my retirement is the name of that course. But I'm going to do another course on aging because I think it's such an important piece to be able to do. And if you have any other thoughts on courses you would like to see, I would love to hear you let me know about it, because I am beginning to work on putting things out there that people would find useful. And any kind of questions would be greatly appreciated. I'm hoping you have a great day and enjoy this very hot summer day. And I am interested in hearing some more. I see there is a question here. But, perhaps that is somebody that I can talk about in another time. So I am more than happy to be able to continue to talk with people. Feel free to email me, and we can continue this conversation. And I'd love to hear your thoughts and feelings. Have a good day.